Hey guys, in this video I'm going to try and draw Elsa or colour her with alcohol markers and pencil colours. So I figured there's a new Frozen movie coming out soon, so not the kind of thing I usually draw. But we did Maleficent the other week, so why not try another Disney character? So I'm going to point out straight away that my lighting was a touch bright, so I have upped the contrast in the video. So if the background and my sleeves look really dark, that's why. It's just so that everything on the page is a bit clearer. So as usual, I've already done the sketch off camera to save some time, because that took probably as long as the rest of the video took. But it is very faint on there, it's just very difficult to see on camera. And the fine liner that I used at the beginning there was a Copic multiliner 0.1. Now normally with marker pieces, I go in with the markers and then I go in with pencil colours afterwards if I want to add any more subtle gradients or anything like that, just for a bit more precision than what I can get personally with markers. But this time I figured I'd try something a little bit different, so I actually go in with the pencil colours first and I try and define the edges of the face and anywhere where I think there's a little bit of shading. So we'll see how this works out. And the pencil colours that I've got here are the Prismacolor Premier pencils and Faber-Castell's Polychromos. So you can see it gradually starting to take a little bit of shape and becoming a little bit more visible on camera. One of the reasons I wanted to try this with pencil colours first, instead of just markers, is I was struggling to get the right colours for Elsa with markers alone. So I figured I'd play around with this. So once I've got some pencil colours on there, they're only faint, I go in then with my marker on top of this. That does obviously mean that you can't erase or smudge the pencil layer underneath the markers. It's almost fixed under there now. So I had to make sure I had that exactly where I wanted it first. And you can see that I do still layer up the marker on itself to get a darker gradient, even on the layers where I'd put the pencil colour down, because they did darken the areas. It's hard to tell on camera, but they were a bit more subtle than I had hoped. So yeah, I do still go over them again with a marker. I used it for other things as well, such as trying to get pink on the cheeks, but I do end up going over them again on top of the marker layer. So for the lips, I do go in with a pink marker, only one shade, and then I go over that with a darker pink or red pencil colour, just to subtly mark in the crease of the lips, or the line between the lips, which would normally be darker. I am going to go in with highlights and things like that later on. Then after I've done the lips, I move on to the eyes. So again, I'm sticking with one marker colour for the eyes. I'm using a blue, and then going in with a Prismacolor pencil that's a blue again, a little bit darker, and just defining the edges and giving them a little bit more depth. Then going in with a black marker to fill in the pupils. The black marker that I use is actually a Spectrum Noir, just because it's what I had to hand. The other markers that I use in the video are mainly my Touch New markers, and some Copics do make an appearance. So once I've done the main bits in the eyes, I go in with the purple eyeshadow or makeup. I'm not sure what you call it, to be honest, because it's quite prominent on the reference photo that I'm using. Looking back now, I should have just used a purple marker. I do think that using purple pencil colours worked, but it's a bit more of a subtle effect. And yeah, it would have looked better in marker. And then after that, I go in with a darker brown pencil colour to draw on the eyebrows. I do have reference open whilst I'm doing this. I go back to using my Copic multiliner here as well for the eyelashes, because these bits I really did want to be dark and pop out from the page. Normally with my marker pieces I do use fine liners a lot, so I'll go around the whole thing. With this one, like in the Maleficent video, I'm trying not to rely on that too much, and basically not trying to use the fine liner all over on every single bit, which usually results in a more cartoony look. Throughout the video you will see me going back to using pencil colours just to add a little bit more shading, touching it up bit by bit. It's quite subtle, especially on camera, but it does all add up. And then I'm just blocking in the rest of the skin tone that I missed and part of her dress. So moving on to the background, I wanted to do a more simplified version of my reference photo. So I only use one shade of blue for this, again with the Touch New markers. I'm starting with the bullet nib just to draw around the outline of Elsa. This was basically so that I could then switch to the chisel side of the marker and fill in the rest of the background quicker, covering more area at once. I like doing this sort of messy look and blocking in all sorts of patchy areas, so I do like that kind of effect. And I normally like to add the highlights last, but I couldn't resist going in and adding some of the highlights into the eyes and the lips. I had to try my best not to overdo it, but it does add a lot, just adding that one little highlight to each eye. I also added a little bit to the eyelids and her cheeks and various other parts of her skin, you know, a dot on the nose and such. Oh, and also lots of dots on the dress bit. Then I go in with a very pale yellow marker that I've got for the hair, and I'm just blocking in the full area first. This bit was quite difficult to find markers for because her hair is almost white in the reference photo. Mine's probably a bit more yellow than it should have been. So I block in that whole area. Then I started going in with a really sharp pencil colour. This was a dark brown, and I was going to try and draw some individual hair strands to add a little bit of detail, but I quickly decided it wasn't looking right. It was changing the hair colour. So I go back to the yellow I originally used, and I'm just going over the same area, and I'm just layering up wherever I want the shadows to be within the hair. And I actually go over this a few times in this area just to add a little bit more depth. So it's almost like using a darker colour marker, but a little bit more subtle. I did keep trying darker markers for this, but they all had slightly different colour tints to them, and I was worried about accidentally changing the colour of her hair overall. Once I had blocked in the areas with a marker though, I do switch back to my pencil colours using a slightly lighter brown and a darker brown, making sure I've got a very fine point for these to draw in some individual hair strands. You probably noticed though, I do keep swapping back to the marker to layer over it again and again, sometimes over the pencil layers in fact, just to see what kind of effect I could get. I will put a link in the description box below to all the bits of equipment that I use in the video. She actually, on the reference photo, does have some little snowflakes in her hair. This was only an A5 piece of paper, so I was struggling to get details as small as that on, so I decided to leave it. And last of all, I just go over the piece with any final details. So this is like adding more pink to her cheeks, adding white pencil colour to her hair, trying to make it a little bit paler, going in with a Jelly Roll pen, and I even swapped to a Posca pen because my Jelly Roll didn't seem to be flowing ink very well. Oh, and also tried something new with the background. I go in with a white pencil colour and I just add almost like a crosshatch effect in little squares and patches all over the background. I'll be honest, it doesn't show up all that well on camera, but in person it gives a pretty cool effect. So overall, I was pretty pleased with the way this turned out. It took me about 3 hours to colour, but it took me a lot longer to actually draw the sketch. But there were a few things that I wasn't happy with. For starters, I actually drew the sketch with a sharp hard lead pencil, and on this paper it actually dug into the page, so even when I tried to erase it out, it left a lot of indents and the pencil colour didn't sit in those indents well. In some areas, I wasn't happy with the way that the pencil colour went down. It doesn't show up as obvious on camera, but it does leave a very, blotchy finish because of the tooth of the paper, compared to, using, say, just markers, which completely gives you a smooth finish. So I could have done with finding a way maybe to blend that out a little bit. And most of all, I messed up the lips and probably the nose a little bit, but the lips were by far the bit that I messed up the most. They are way too small. I was honestly a little bit scared of changing it quite far on and just ruining the whole thing. So I'll put a picture up on screen there so you can see it with better lighting. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely leave me a comment below. Let me know what other videos you guys want to see in the future. And as always, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, everyone.